Energy Nerd Show and Tell is a lot like book club, but no wine and cheese and more grass.
And you don't have to read any books.
No prep involved, yeah. I'm not sure they read the books in our book club anyway, but. Hey, Pat. This is a really interesting graph you've got here.
So this here is a chart that I put together based on data released by the Energy Information Administration, the EIA. And this is all data that comes from their annual energy outlook, or what we often like to call the AEO. Every year, EIA publishes their AEO, and there's a bunch of different scenarios that they look at. They look at a reference case, so sort of the best guess expectation of the future. They look at a case where gas prices are really high. They might look at a case where economic activity is slower than might be expected. And every year they tend to look at a couple of other sort of interesting side cases. And what I've done in this chart is show a couple of those, really to highlight the ones that are most focused on EIA's version of what a low carbon future might look like. I think the one thing that a lot of viewers might take away from these right away is that none of these actually come anywhere close to a low carbon future. The number that people like to throw around a lot is 80% by 2050. We have to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases by 80% by 2050.
And these projections are not even 50% by 2050 relative to the peak around 2005.
No, that's exactly right. Right now, we're at about maybe 4% below 2050 levels nationwide. In the reference case line, it basically dips down, but then comes back up, and it's about the same level by 2050. In EIA's sort of most aggressive projection, they only reduce emissions by about 30% relative to 1990 levels. So I think one of the things that this is really showing is, EIA is basically the starting point for a lot of other analysts when they're thinking about projections of the future. They're, not necessarily regarded as perfect, but they're the official projection of the U.S. government if one official projection were to exist. And I think what's really telling here is even in their most aggressive decarbonization cases, it's just not really getting anywhere close to where we need to be.
So to be clear, that dashed line is not theirs. That's your linear trend line that would get us to 80% reduction, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, that line could really look like anything. It could be a scoop. It could be, shallower in the short term and steeper in the long term. But really what the consensus is among climate scientists is that emissions need to reduce by 80% by 2050 in order to avoid catastrophic climate change. Whatever that trajectory looks like, that's the end goal.
This is a great episode for kind of framing the big picture and the challenge, right? And then we're going to have a lot of episodes of the Energy Nerd Show and Tell dealing with buildings and transportation and the electric grid. And in a way, those are all particular pieces of how we get on a track like that dashed line or better. I mean, arguably we need to be net zero by 2050.
So, but the EIA got to that just barely 30% reduction by just looking at economy-wide CO2 prices, right?
That's right. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you could get there. You could impose more stringent renewable portfolio standards. And in fact, that's that other clean energy line that's close to the reference case. Or you could invest in certain policies that make low carbon technologies cheaper than the alternatives. These couple of scenarios that EIA has demonstrated here aren't the whole story. There's many more that could be looked at. And I'm fond of saying that this is really we need to do everything kind of approach. It's not going to be just carbon pricing. It's not going to be just rebates for appliances. It's not going to be just wind or just solar. It's got to be absolutely everything all at once. And that's pretty much the only way I think we're going to get to 80% by 2050.
There's a lot of work to do. Thanks, Pat.
Sure. See you later.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. This is Energy Nerd Show and Tell.
It's the show that we want to watch, so we're thinking maybe some of you energy nerds want to watch it too. If you do, then tell your friends and subscribe right around here. Click there.
And check
or there or over here.
Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and where else.
Yeah, and the Energy Nerd website at energynerdshow.com. You can always go there. And if you want to be a guest, you can volunteer to be a guest. We love to have guests. In fact, that's kind of what the show is all about.
Absolutely.